welcome in wherever you may be listening, however you may be making this part of your day. Thanks so much. I screwed up every time. I'm Doug Gottlieb in for Colin. This is The Herd, iHeart Radio, Fox Sports Radio on Fox Sports 1. Download the Herd Now podcast. You, like 10 million other people, can get on board. Hope you're ready for an incredible new year. We got New Year's football. We got Christmas basketball we're still reacting to. LeBron sitting out for the Lakers tonight. Man, do we have a lot to get to. A litany of talented guests as well. But let's start by checking in on one of the foremost franchises in terms of reputation in all of sports, the Green Bay Packers, Lambeau Field. And boy, do they have a lot going for them. Seems like they figured out their running back situation. They have their quarterback under contract, albeit a hefty one for years to come, and they're the Packers. As they've reconfigured their front office, reconfigured their defense, they seem to be a play or two away, even this season, from being in the playoffs. And if they make the right decision at coach and get everybody on board, there's no reason to believe that they can't get back to competing with the Bears and with the Vikings for supremacy in the NFC North. So the big question has been, who can be the guy who commands the respect of the locker room, more importantly, the respect of number 12, all while authoring the next chapter in the Packers' legacy? Who could be that guy? And we're beginning to get a sense that the Packers believe that in order to do this job, you have to have done this job before. It's not crazy to think, right? That, hey, we want a guy with head coaching experience. Because in order to walk in front of a room of 53 men who have families and contracts to worry about and get them on board, we don't want some guy who just came out of college. We don't want some coordinator who's never done it before. We're watching what's happened in Detroit. That's messy, right? We watched even guys that haven't called plays before call plays in Minnesota. That's messy. Aaron Rodgers threw out some modest support of Joe Philbin going back to Sunday. That's interesting. So look, Joe Philbin's been a head coach before in Miami. And then the news came out that Jim Caldwell, former head coach twice over. All right, look, he was head coach with Peyton Manning in the Colts, and that seemed to work out. It didn't work out as well with Detroit, but Detroit seemed better off with him than they did with Matt Patricia. There's a guy who commands respect. There's a certain amount of elegance with how he carries himself, right? He's not a fire and brimstone guy, but he's also not asleep at the wheel. Like, I don't think Jim Caldwell is the best candidate in the world, but you can do a whole lot worse than Jim Caldwell, considering, hey, man, he did in fact coach the great Peyton Manning. He managed that ego, that situation, without stepping on landmines. All right. Well, who else did they call? Wait, who? Excuse me? Chuck Pagano? Listen, I get Chuck Pagano was a great defensive mind. Did get the job amidst a bunch of hope with the Colts. And remember, the Colts, the thought was, hey, we've gone offense. Let's take a tip from that Ravens defense, right? Because the Ravens defensive family has given us Marvin Lewis, ups and downs. It's given us Rex Ryan. It's given us Mike Pettin, who, of course, is part of the Green Bay Packers staff as their defensive coordinator, and it's given us Chuck Pagano. The problem with hiring Pagano, well, there's two problems. Like, look, Chuck Pagano had Chuck Strong. He was unfortunately, really sadly stricken by cancer early in his coaching career with the Indianapolis Colts. And because of that, like, let's just kind of call it like it is. You can't, and it's like in the NFL, the lie is you never lose your job to injury, but no one ever loses their job to cancer, right? Bruce Arians, no matter how good a job he did, it's not like you're going to go like, hey, Chuck, we know you were out with cancer and fighting for your life, but we can't give you your job back. The problem with Chuck Pagano is there's one play that will live in infamy. Right? There's one play that is, however fair, however unfair, and it's mostly unfair. They did go to the AFC Championship game with Andrew Luck. Right? They did have the greatest comeback in the history, statistically, in the history of the AFC playoffs when Chuck Pagano was the head coach. That did, in fact, happen. The problem with Chuck Pagano is everyone remembers this play.
You got Griff Whalen ready to take the snap. He'll snap it. Actually, Colt Anderson is behind him. And what in the world? Flag is down.
The whole right side of the line was not on the line of scrimmage. Offense. This penalty is declined. The result of the play is first down for New England.
You got a guy on either side of him. What are you doing here? What was the plan?
I don't know. I mean, completely nuts.
It was not figuratively. It was literally the worst play call I have ever seen. Okay, one, whatever fake punt they wanted to call wasn't open, right? There was the defense was properly adjusted to it. Two, even if it had worked, it was an illegal formation, so it would have been called back. Three, the Colts had 3 timeouts. They could have simply used one if they didn't like the alignment. None of these 3 things happened. Oh, and if there's a fourth thing, it was against the Patriots, a game that everybody watched, their arch rival or maybe their nemesis for the Colts for a long time when they had Peyton Manning and even when they have Andrew Luck. It's the Patriots. Everybody's watching in a standalone Sunday night game. So it's not like it happened Sunday at 1 o'clock where you're like, man, that was really weird. We move on. No one's been able to move on from it. And look, there are other issues to Pagano as head coach as they got progressively worse. Some of it not his fault because he worked for a general manager who traded a 4th overall pick for Trent Richardson. Not all his fault. But, man, it's hard to take the Packers seriously when that's the call that you make. I'm not sure if you guys are into viral videos. Some viral videos I think are fakes. Some are real. I feel like this one has to be real because it was shot from somebody else's car behind a Tesla somewhere in what I believe to be Southern California. But I think it's an appropriate parallel or metaphor to what the Packers are caught up in doing. If you're listening to us on the iHeartRadio app or on your Fox Sports Radio app at some point, search this online. There's a video that's gone viral of a woman in Southern California, blonde hair back in some sort of bun, wearing a skirt, some sort of fake leather jacket, and she pulls up at a gas station with a Tesla. And for 3 minutes and change, she attempts to look for the gas tank for the Tesla. She walks around, she pops the trunk, she looks in, then finally she opens up the charging dock and attempts to put gas into the charging dock. At some point, a gentleman comes over and informs her that that's an electric car. There is, in fact, no gas tank. Right? I'm sorry, it's a time sucker. You're going to send it to all your friends. You're going to tweet it and retweet it. It's become viral already. There are people in all sorts of Malaysian countries that are laughing at us because this is how they view all Americans. This is how I view the Green Bay Packers. Right? You got a Tesla. You got a really expensive, at times touchy, luxury automobile. You have Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers is a little bit quirky, a little bit touchy, a little bit sensitive, takes things personally, carries a chip on his shoulder, knows he can't ever seemingly fight the Favre thing, even though in many ways he's a much more efficient, smarter, better quarterback than Brett Favre. Okay? That said, he's a Tesla. He's a luxury item. And you're walking around trying to put Chuck Pagano in the gas tank. Right? You're sitting there and you're like, hey, any head coaching experience? This is the thing about when you're hiring. If you're only looking for somebody with experience, what if it's really bad experience? What if you were really bad at the job? Like Chuck Pagano's teams got worse, not better. Chuck Pagano teams at times seem to perform well in spite of, not because of him. When Bruce Arians coached the team, they were better offensively. They made better decisions. And so even though Chuck Pagano has that check mark for experience, the signal you send out to the rest of the league is, dude, you don't even care if you were a good coach as long as you've been a head coach before. All of America is rolling their eyes and cackling at the idea of Pagano because he's buddies with Pettin getting an interview. Hey, you got to give my guy an interview. No, we don't. Jim Caldwell, legit candidate. Joe Philbin, legit candidate because, look, he was with the Packers before as offensive coordinator. He obviously has a relationship with Aaron Rodgers. There's trust there. And though it didn't work out in Miami, all right, it didn't work out in Miami. Miami hasn't worked out for a million different coaches, seemingly since Don Shula retired. But that viral video looks a lot like the Green Bay Packers right now. Where does this thing go? Where does this thing go? Why can't I find where the gas goes? Because Chuck Pagano doesn't go into a Tesla. He just doesn't. Coming up next, Baker Mayfield can get